a training mission. What is it going to turn into? There's no parameter, there's no clarity, there's no deadline. So that's what we're worried about with regard to your mission. We're not sure that it's going to be a training mission, and we're worried that it's going to turn into a military mission.
Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Sudbury.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to talk about a group whose work has significantly helped to settle refugees in our riding, Lifeline Sudbury.
Sudbury is made up of 17 community groups, including the local mosque, the local synagogue, various Christian churches, and community service clubs. Lifeline has brokered resources and donations from a variety of stakeholders and helped to welcome Syrian families to Sudbury. So far, 2 Syrian families have arrived and started to settle in Sudbury. Their children are all in school, and one father has already found employment. Sudbury has embraced both families warmly, and we look forward to welcoming many more families in the months to come.
We have to continue to welcome people in need, and we're convinced that our communities will be stronger, more prosperous, and resilient in the future. Hats off to Lifeline Sudbury and groups that are doing similar work across the country.
The honourable member for Perth Wellington.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I had the privilege of attending the 40th annual Bowl for Kids' Sake in Mount Forest in my riding of Perth Wellington. This is an annual fundraiser in support of the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of North Wellington. Back in 1976, Marnie Mainland and her team of volunteers raised $500 during the very first Bowl-a-thon. Fast forward 40 years later, and Terry Dykeman and her team of volunteers are looking to raise over $50,000 in support of the programs for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. I had the opportunity to bowl a few frames with my provincial and municipal colleagues, as well as with some volunteers and local young people. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the real winners were the kids. Not just because they schooled us at bowling, but also because of the opportunities they will be provided with through the funds raised. I would like to wish all the volunteers with the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of North Wellington all the best in achieving their goals. And I want to thank them for their service to our community and to our young people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Brampton North.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a moment to pay tribute to former regional councillor Mr. Paul Anthony Paleschi. Papa Paleschi, as he was commonly known in Brampton, represented the residents of Wards 2 and 6, part of which fall into my riding of Brampton North. He served the city of Brampton as councillor for nearly 30 years. Those who served with him recall his desire for public service and his wild sense of humor. Papa Paleschi served on numerous boards and committees, including being the president of Peel Region Living. He also chaired the city's planning committee and was instrumental in raising money for various local initiatives. Most notably are his efforts in raising approximately $1 million for William Osler Health Hospitals. His passing will leave a void in the hearts of Brantonians and the local political scene. On behalf of the House, I extend my condolences to his wife Patricia, his daughter Michelle, and his son Councillor Michael Paleschi, who carries on his father's legacy.
The Honourable Member for Hochelaga. Mr. Speaker, my riding is unfortunately facing the same housing and homelessness problems we're seeing across the country. A rent subsidy has enabled Mr. Jacques Bacon to live for more than 30 years in decent cooperative housing, despite his meager income due to functional limitations. If the government doesn't renew the funding for these agreements in social housing, the price of his rent will double, and he may well end up in the street. The new approach, Housing First, under the HPS brought in by the Conservatives, has resulted in significant cuts to programming helping fight homelessness. And the Foyer des Jeunes Travailleurs has to close 9 beds. And the Cap Barnabé night shelter has been closed in the middle of winter because 2 frontline worker positions out of 4 were cut because of the realignment of the strategy. We're losing social housing at a time when funding is being cut to prevent homelessness. If the government doesn't take action immediately, we'll be facing real trouble, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Mr. Speaker, on October 19th, our parliamentary colleagues didn't really celebrate at all. Mr. Speaker, in Boisbriand, called Elopac, celebrated its anniversary. And Mr. Speaker, they have manufacture the milk carton that we use on a daily basis. They produce some 60% of all packaging for liquids in Canada, and also provides a product to companies in the U.S. and Mexico. I'd like to celebrate this 100th anniversary that has stood the test of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising in the House today to pay tribute to a great Conservative in my riding of Sarnia-Lambton who passed away this week at the age of 96. Ivan Mader grew up on the family farm in the prairies during the Depression before joining the Royal Canadian Navy in 1941 and crossing the Atlantic 30 times during World War II. After the war, Ivan helped to build the Sarnia General Hospital, churches, apartment buildings, and Dow Chemical. He was a longtime member of the Conservative Party, the Golden K Kiwanis, Central Baptist, the Shriners, and the Royal Canadian Legion. His wisdom, his love of gardening, and his care for others will be sorely missed. Please join me in extending sympathies to his children, his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pontiac.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the late Robert Rooney, co-founder of the Wakefield International Film Festival, for his important contributions to the riding of Pontiac. Held annually since 2010, the Wakefield International Film Festival has inspired and united our community by presenting the best new documentaries to packed audiences in our rural riding. Robert a élaboré le festival pour 2016
He had worked on preparing the 2016 festival, which was the last thing that he did before her passing away in January. He was a creative force in the community. He believed in documentaries and felt that they could be a force for change. He felt it was important to share this change.
Robert helped arrange Nelson Mandela's first public visit to Canada. I commend Robert Rooney's social, political, and artistic contributions, and in his honor and in the honor of his wife Brenda, I invite members to attend the 2016 Wakefield International Film Festival, so close to Ottawa, and 2 weekends of screening remaining.
The honourable member for Sackville Preston Chesapeake.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today to congratulate the team of young female curlers from Nova Scotia for their gold medal win in the 2016 Canadian Junior Curling Championship, which took place in Stratton, Ontario, between January 23rd and January 30th. The Nova Scotia team of Mary Fay, Kristen Clark, Carly Burgess, and Jeannick Leblanc defeated the British Columbia rink by a score of 9-5. The team's lead, Jeannick Leblanc, is a resident of my riding. Peu de temps avant le tournoi.
Just before the tournament, Jeannick suddenly lost her father, Jacques Leblanc, a defender of the French language in the region as well as in New Brunswick, and this was extremely difficult for her. However, Jeannick's strength, determination, and dedication to her sport and her teammates helped her to overcome a huge challenge with unparalleled results.
Congratulate the team.
The honourable member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
But Mr. Speaker, it would appear as though the sunny ways are over. On February the 2nd, Wharton Willie predicted that we are in for a long, cold winter, and so far, he seems to be right, at least when it comes to this Liberal government. Now, don't let the member for Cape Breton-Canso and the infamous Shubenacadie Sam fool you with their predictions of an early spring and more sunny ways. Canadians from coast to coast to coast know that they are in for a cold one, with deficits and federal spending spiraling out of control and the government committing to backing away from the fight against ISIS. Mr. Speaker, I know Wharton Willie certainly wouldn't cut and run. Surely Sam will point to his buddy in Balzac for support. Balzac Billy also predicted we were in for an early spring, but poor Billy and the member for Banff-Airdrie haven't been sure which way to turn since the NDP took over in Alberta. Well, Mr. Speaker, at least we can trust Wharton Willie to give us the cold, hard truth. With this Liberal government at the helm, we are in for a long, cold winter.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Ville-Marie, the Sud-Ouest Île-des-Sœurs. Mr. Speaker, I rise today towards the end of Black History Month to talk about the future for Black people, namely because I represent La Petite Bourgogne, Montreal's historic Black community neighborhood. Although it is an underprivileged neighborhood, it has produced an astonishing wealth of legends such as Oscar Peterson and Oliver Jones, as well as 2 governors general, including Michael Jean.
Concentrations of social housing in North America. Coupled with ongoing discrimination, the soaring cost of living is the greatest source of exclusion in society and compromises the future of the Black community. This government will right this wrong by investing billions in social housing and reforming family allocation to benefit 9 out of 10 Canadian families. Mr. Speaker, as I celebrated Nelson Mandela Day at the historic Union United Church 2 weeks ago, I was reminded that freedom cannot ring without fairness, and fairness is an election promise no member of Parliament can afford to break.
Hear, hear.
Way to go, Mark.
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
Monsieur le Président, depuis
Mr. Speaker, since the start of the year, with the arrival of many new Canadians of Syrian origin into our riding, school children in my riding of Toronto Danforth have been doing their part. Canada is a welcoming country, and Canadians are warm people.
have been crafting wonderful Welcome to Canada cards for their neighbours. Students from Duke of Connaught and the Chester Public School Grade 4 Extended French class have all crafted wonderful, in some cases bilingual cards. Let's say, for example, Canada is a war-free zone, so you'll have a lot of fun. By the way, you should definitely go swimming in the summer because it can get cold in the winter. Signed, your new friend. These students exemplify the kind-heartedness that Canada is known for around the world. I'd like to thank them for their warm welcome to the Syrian newcomers in my riding and offer my colleagues some of these fantastic cards to share with their new constituents.
The honourable member for Brantford Grant.
Mr. Speaker, on the day when the Ontario Finance Minister is setting the stage for his 9th consecutive Liberal deficit, Canada's Finance Minister announced he will be bringing the same Liberal approach to Ottawa. The Liberals inherited a surplus of $2.2 billion, but guess what? It's already gone. In just 100 days, the Liberals have gone on a $5 billion spending spree, and that's before taking any action on their platform spending commitments. We now know that the federal deficit will be in the range of $30 billion, 3 times the election promise. And the Finance Minister is admitting he will not fulfill the Prime Minister's mandate letter, which directed him to balance the budget in the first term. The Liberals have big plans to recklessly spend on borrowed money and no plans to pay it back. They've abandoned all their fiscal anchors, and Canadian families and businesses will be on the hook to foot the bill.
The honourable member for St. John's South Mount Pearl.
Mr. Speaker, last night I had dinner with my folks. That's something I'm grateful for. 3 months ago, my dad had a triple bypass. Mr. Speaker, February is Heart Month in Canada. Heart disease and stroke takes one life every 7 minutes. 90% of Canadians have at least one risk factor. Thanks to 125,000 dedicated volunteers and 1.4 million donors, the Heart and Stroke Foundation makes a difference in reducing the impact of this disease. Since its inception in 1952, the foundation has invested more than $1.45 billion in research, which is key in advancing the foundation's goal of reducing deaths from heart disease and stroke by 25% by the year 2020. Mr. Speaker, we need to continue to inform our constituents about the importance of healthy living, and by supporting the Heart and Stroke Foundation this February, we can all make a real difference in the lives of Canadians. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, Dad's doing best kind. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kootenay, Columbia.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to recognize the hard work of the constituents of Kootenay, Columbia, who are organizing to bring Syrian refugees to Canada. Across my riding, we are blessed to have many groups of dedicated citizens working towards this important goal, including the Creston Refugee Committee, the Caslow Refugee Committee, the Kimberley Refugee Resettlement Group. In Cranbrook, the Hub for Refugees, the Catholic Refugee Group, and the Baptist Group of Friends. In Nelson, the Nelson Friends of Refugees, the Kootenay Refugee Committee, and the Cathedral Refugee Committee. I also want to recognize the work of the Nelson Refugee Committee Coalition, who are currently hosting 2 women from East Africa and are working to bring their 9 children to Canada. My thanks to all of them for their tireless work, and thank you to all of the groups across our country for demonstrating to the world the generosity of the Canadian spirit. We salute you.
Honourable member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday, the Liberals invented a new term for a job-killing tax. The Environment Minister called their new carbon tax a market mechanism. I suppose to a Liberal, having the government decide the rate, impose it on the public, and forcibly collect the money makes it a market mechanism. If we look, we might find other market mechanisms, like the personal income market mechanism, where a certain percentage of everything you earn gets taken by force by the federal government. Or like the goods and services market mechanism, that forces consumers to pay 5% more for everything they buy. And of course, when you sell something at a profit, you'll have to pay capital gains market mechanisms on that too. But Mr. Speaker, Canadians won't be fooled by this newspeak. They know that when the government imposes a fee or a cost on something, that it's a tax. Instead of inventing new terms to hide their real agenda, the Liberals should just come clean. Their double talk is market mechanisming our patience.
The honourable member for Surrey Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, Surrey Newton experienced an armed standoff that thankfully ended peacefully. Much of the crime that continues to impact Surrey streets is directly related to illegal firearms smuggled into Canada. Today, I rise to praise the Prime Minister's commitment to provide $100 million each year to the provinces and territories to support guns and gangs police task forces to take illegal guns off our streets and reduce gang violence. This is a very strong first step to counteract gun violence across Canada. This is welcome news for all residents of Surrey Newton who are tired of living in fear in their own neighbourhoods. I can assure my constituents that this government is committed to being proactive on the issue of gun violence and gangs, and we will continue to take active steps to ensure that illegal guns remain off our streets. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, today is a troubling day for Canadian taxpayers and Canadians who have lost their jobs. We found out today that the Liberals have no plan to create jobs. They have no plan to control their spending. The only plan they have is to borrow more money. Wow. What the Liberals don't seem to realize is that it doesn't matter how much money you borrow or why you're borrowing it, someone has to pay it back at the end of the day.
That's right.
So my question is to the Prime Minister, does he now realize that budgets don't balance themselves?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I was surprised, Mr. Speaker, to hear the member opposite try and say that, quote, now is not the time to spend based on slow economic growth. Well, not only do we disagree with the member opposite, we ran a campaign on exactly our disagreement on that. And it looks like Canadians agreed with us that we will invest in infrastructure, that we'll put money in the pockets of the middle class and those working hard to join. We will invest in innovation and the kind of future and growth that the economy needs. That's exactly what we committed to do. That's exactly what we're doing.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in less than 100 days, the Liberals have frittered away a surplus, and now we learn that they are going to throw us into $18 billion of debt for spending that's already been undertaken. And we understand that they're also going to borrow yet another $10 billion. Instead of taking responsibility, they're doing everything they can to justify their terrible economic management. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister continues this. I have one question. Who's going to pay for all this? Yeah, right, Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians have been paying for a long time, for 10 years of the lamentable economic record from the Conservative government. They didn't create the necessary growth. They didn't invest in a strong future for the manufacturing sector. For 10 years, Canada has not had the kind of economic growth that we need. That's why we were elected, to invest in the economy, to build the middle class, and to give a better future to all Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What the Canadians got for the last 10 years was an actual plan, a plan that created 1.3 million net new jobs. Mr. Speaker, a plan that lowered taxes to the lowest level in 50 years, balanced the budget, and created a surplus. And what did that mean? It meant that Canada became the best place in the world to invest in and create jobs in. And what did these guys do in 100 days, Mr. Speaker? They blew that record. Does the Prime Minister understand that Canadians actually want a plan, not just more Liberal spending?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for 10 years, Canadians put up with a previous government that twisted the numbers, that picked and chose what it wanted to say, and refused to accept that they ran us into deficit in 2015-2016. We inherited a need to invest in our economy, to fix the wrongs that this previous government was unable to create, the growth, the support, the investments that were going to lead to a better future for all Canadians. That's what we got elected to do, and that's what we're going to deliver.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we, the Conservatives, we left the Fiscal House in order. We left it clean. According to the Fiscal Monitor from the Department of Finance, a surplus of $1 billion the Conservatives left, and now the Liberals $18.4 billion of deficit. That doesn't make any sense, Mr. Speaker. It's clear that the Liberals were not ready to govern. The Prime Minister needs to take responsibility, and I ask him, will he finally control public spending so that all Canadians will be protected? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I appreciate what the member opposite is saying, but the reality, and he probably didn't closely look at what was done by his colleagues who were elected for 10 years, who fudged the numbers, who didn't give the right numbers out, and who are now trying to show that they had a surplus, a magic surplus, but the reality is that they left us in deficit. We were elected on a commitment to invest in communities. The Conservatives are calling for further cuts. That's not what we need right now in this country. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, it's clear that the Prime Minister doesn't have have confidence in his own finance department, which said that we're left with a surplus of $1 billion. Well, we shouldn't be surprised, Mr. Speaker. Remember, this is the Prime Minister who said that budgets balance themselves. But look, Mr. Speaker, it turns out that the imaginary world of the Prime Minister is crumbling like a house of cards with this $18.4 billion deficit. That's the reality. When will the Prime Minister take control of public spending? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. It was the previous government that never understood, and they still don't understand, that economic growth, that's what creates prosperity. That's what creates jobs. And not being able to create economic growth from 10 years? Well, that's led us into the situation that we're in today. They refuse to accept that, and now they're saying that we should cut the Canadian economy right now instead of investing. That's completely ridiculous, and that's exactly what they're calling for, and that's why you're in opposition today. The Honourable Member for Outremont. Mr. Speaker, the 2,600 employees of Avios feel that they have suffered. The prime solidarity has been called for, and that the government must respect the act. The Prime Minister said that it was unfortunate that promises were not kept. Now the Prime Minister, now elected, is taking away the rights of Avios' workers. What's changed for the Prime Minister? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are obviously very concerned by job losses at Bombardier across the country, and that's why we need to invest in the high-tech manufacturing sector. And we're very proud that the agreement with Air Canada for maintenance in Quebec for 20 years for new C-Series jets is in place. That's a good news story for workers in that province, and we will continue to encourage investment in aerospace here in Canada and in Quebec. The honourable member for Outremont.
So much for his principles. We're talking about 2,600 good jobs at Avios. They had to go to court twice to protect those jobs, and they won both times. The Air Canada Act, the law is crystal clear. Maintenance jobs have to stay in Montreal, Mississauga, and Winnipeg. In 2012, the Liberal leader agreed. He stood by the workers, even rallied with them here on Parliament Hill. But today, he wants to take away their rights. So, does the Prime Minister only support workers when the Conservatives are in power?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we're happy to work with the industry and with workers to make sure that we're getting good quality jobs here in Canada. That's why we salute the Air Canada deal to buy 45 C-Series Bombardier planes, where maintenance will be done specifically in Quebec for the next 20 years. Perfect. This means good jobs. This is the kind of good work we're doing here. That's exactly what we're going to continue to do to ensure that we have a strong and growing economy for everyone in this country.
Bravo. The honourable member for Outremont.
Speaker, the Finance Minister today announced growing deficits, but refused to say whether struggling Canadians will get the help they were promised. Families in Alberta and Saskatchewan are being hit hard by rising job losses, but while unemployment is going up, the number of Canadians receiving unemployment insurance is actually going down. This is a broken system, and families are paying the price. Alberta is asking the federal government to act quickly by lowering the threshold for eligibility and by extending benefits. Will the Prime Minister listen and act? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. We have been listening. We made a commitment during the election campaign to strengthen the EI system, and that's exactly what we're going to do. In fact, during the election campaign, we made a commitment to invest in communities to help Canadians, to put more money in the pockets of middle-class Canadians. The member opposite made a campaign promise, as we all know, to balance the budget, which means right now he'd be cutting billions and billions of dollars from the Canadian economy instead of making the investments we need. So I'm happy to talk about campaign promises, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Outremont. Only 36% of workers who lose their jobs will have access to EI. The Liberal government is abandoning thousands of workers and their families, but there's one thing that's clear. Those families won't be able to pay their rent, won't be able to pay their bills, and they will not be able to pay for their groceries with the hollow words of this Prime Minister. The Liberals, will they, yes or no, in their budget, create a universal eligibility threshold of 3,600 hours for EI, yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I've already said, Mr. Speaker, we committed to improve the EI system to ensure that Canadians who need it across the country have access to that program. That is exactly what we're going to do, and we will invest in the economy. The opposition member unfortunately made a promise to cut in the Canadian economy instead of investing, and we are going to invest the necessary money to help families who need it across the country.
The honourable member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance announced yet another outside consultant today to be appointed to head up a committee, this time to report in 2017 on the economy. So far there's been a consultant to set an economic agenda. There's been a consultant to help let them understand how to deliver on an agenda, and a consultant to figure out how to pick infrastructure projects. Isn't that what the Department of Finance does, Mr. Speaker?
Great point.
But my question to the Minister of Finance is this. How long do Canadians have to wait for an actual plan while these very expensive and high-priced men sit down to try to figure out the fate of the Canadian economy?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, March 22nd. That's how long. In the last election, Canadians made a choice. They made a choice between a party that said they wanted to make a plan to invest in growth and another couple parties that said that they wanted to cut at all costs for a balanced budget. Canadians made the right choice. I'd like us to consider the alternative right now. If one of the other parties were in power, we would have deep, massive cuts of tens of billions of dollars, leading to higher unemployment while Canadians are troubled and most likely a recession. Canadians made the right choice, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, the alternative would be that this country would still be in a surplus like we left it. Even today, Canadians still don't know how much the Minister of Finance is borrowing from them to cover his Liberal government's deficit. But what Canadians and his own officials do know is that the Conservatives left him a surplus. Now, he laughingly rejects his own officials' conclusions, but isn't that because he desperately needs to shift the blame away from his own mismanagement?
The Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to repeat to this House what I've said before. 1 month, 2 months do not make a year. What we can see is that the revenues of the government go down in the last couple months of the year and the expenses go up. It is clear to us that the Conservatives, through their actions and inactions, left us with a deficit. That is our starting point, the Conservative deficit and the $150 billion of additional debt they left for Canadians.
The member for Regina Capel.
Changes came about when they started spending more of Canadians' tax dollars. It must be embarrassing for the minister to visit his own department because everybody there disagrees with him. Now, the Prime Minister just accused us of picking and choosing numbers. Well, we did. We picked and chose his own Finance Department's numbers. For the second month in a row, the Finance Department's own report shows that Conservatives left the Liberals with a surplus. Does the minister accept this latest report? And if not, who's he going to fire?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, I'd like to repeat to this House, this morning we put out economic update for Canadians to see. Our goal is to be open and transparent with Canadians, understand where we're at today and where we're going. What we've told Canadians is the Conservatives left us with a deficit. Unfortunately, they're picking and choosing month by month. At the end of the year, that's what we're left with, and we're going to work to make the right investments so we can grow this economy for the first time in a long time.
Honourable member for Carleton.
To create an awesome company, it takes treasure and talent, but young companies often don't have the treasure to pay for the talent, so they use stock options. In fact, thousands of companies have grown through the use of stock options right across this country, many of them entrepreneurs right here in Ottawa. They're now speaking out against the Liberal plan to double taxes on stock options, which they say would drive thousands of jobs and opportunities abroad. Will the Liberals announce they're reversing their plan to raise taxes on these job creators so that we can keep these excellent opportunities right here at home?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we made important commitments to Canadians during the course of our campaign. We said that we were going to invest in the middle class. We've already started in that. We've told Canadians we want to add a Canadian child benefit for the most vulnerable. We also said we're going to invest in infrastructure and in an innovative economy. We will be putting forth in our budget 2016, in just 4 short weeks, a program and a plan that will show Canadians how we're going to have a more innovative economy going forward.
The honourable member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, instead of putting Canadians to work, the Liberals want to have the Royal Canadian Navy's boats built outside of Canada, and yet Canada's shipyards have the competence, the expertise, and the capacity that's needed to build those ships here, and our Canadian workers need those jobs. Jobs outside of Canada, nothing for Canadians. Is that the Liberal approach? Mr. Speaker, will the Liberals go back on their own promise and abandon Canadian families as they're doing right now in Alberta?
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for his question. This government is as committed as ever to the national shipbuilding strategy. No decision has been made with respect to the naval ship, the tugboats, yet. It is still in its infancy in terms of planning, but I can tell you that once decisions have been made, whatever we do will be in the best interest of Canadians and the Canadian industry.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, the Royal Canadian Navy requires tugboats to serve its fleet, presenting an exciting opportunity for Canadian shipyards. Thousands of jobs in this country depend on a healthy shipbuilding sector, but this government is leaving people with uncertainty. Just this Friday, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services Procurement had said, quote unquote, the vessels will be built in Canada. But her officials now say that new vessels don't have to be built in Canada. Who's telling the truth here? And will this government stand and unequivocally state those jobs will be staying in Canada, not exported?
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, we are still at the early stages in terms of planning for the replacement of the tugboats for the Navy. As we go down the path looking at what is required, that is when we will ensure that the best interests of Canadians are followed here in terms of making sure that benefits go to Canadians and that the Canadian industry benefits from whatever we do with respect to the tugboat ships and any ships that are bought are made in Canada.
The Honourable Member for Laurier Ste. Marie. Mr. Speaker, last year the Liberals criticized the former government for its elastic definition of the term combat mission. At the time, the Prime Minister's current foreign policy advisor said that the mission in Iraq was a combat mission. He asked the Conservatives to be honest with Canadians. And now we have a new Prime Minister and we have an expanded mission, but still no clear answers. Will the Prime Minister finally stop denying the evidence and admit that our soldiers are in a combat mission?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for the question. This is a non-combat mission. However, we're in a conflict zone. Our troops will be at risk. This is the reasons why we've mitigated this with many aspects of bringing in certain capabilities. In addition to I'd also like to remind the member that our troops are very highly trained. But I also want to point out that they are not the principal combatants. However, they have the right to inheritance and self-defense, and we have rules, robust rules of engagement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Esquimalt, Saanich-Sooke.
Well, let's go through this one more time. Last year, the Liberals complained about the former Prime Minister's tinkering with the definition of combat missions. Back then, the man who's now the Prime Minister's senior foreign policy advisor said the Iraq mission was combat and that the government should be honest with Canadians on such a serious matter. The Prime Minister may have changed, but the mission has only expanded, and Canadians still aren't getting a straight answer. Will the Minister finally admit that despite Liberal campaign promises, Canada's troops are still engaged in a combat mission in Iraq?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, we took a very thorough analysis and making sure that we supported our allies in the fight against ISIL. We are committed to defeating ISIL, and tripling the training mission and doubling the intelligence will help the coalition in this manner. And I think the member can agree that ISIL is this horrible atrocity that has to be defeated, and Canadians, alongside with their coalition partners, will do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisgar.
Mr. Speaker, with oil prices at an all-time low, people in Alberta, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick are desperate and out of work. They are looking for a glimmer of hope. A job-killing carbon tax is the absolute last thing that they need, a tax that would put a nail in the coffin of those people who work in the oil patch. Will the Minister of Natural Resources stand up to his cabinet colleagues? Would he stand up for jobs in Canada? Would he say no to a carbon tax and yes to Canadian jobs for the sake of the natural resources sector?
Yeah. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Climate change is one of the major challenges of our generation. It is something that we must address to ensure the sustainability of our environment for our children and our grandchildren. It also presents, Mr. Speaker, an enormous economic opportunity. Our government is providing leadership, working with the provinces and territories to bring about a pan-Canadian framework with respect to climate change. The Prime Minister will be meeting with his colleagues in Vancouver in a couple of weeks, and we will be working through a range of mechanisms, including addressing a price on carbon as part of a broad-based strategy to address climate change.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisgar.
Mr. Speaker, how tone-deaf can this government be? A carbon tax puts Canada at a huge competitive disadvantage, Mr. Speaker. Investors are leaving Canada in droves because of the Liberals' confusing regulatory system. And if job creators see a carbon tax, they are going to see that as a Canada is closed for business. Is there a leader in this government who will be like the Premier of Saskatchewan, who wants Canada competitive and wants to see Canada open for business? Or under the Liberals, is Canada closed for business?
I know the member for Kenora is enthused about this. I know he's a long way down there, but I'm going to encourage him to restrain himself. The Honourable Member, the Parliamentary Secretary for Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said before, this government is serious about addressing climate change. We understand the economic opportunity that is inherent in actually effectively addressing climate change. I would mention to the honourable member that 80% of Canadians already live in jurisdictions where the provincial governments have taken the lead in standing up and actually meeting our obligations, our international obligations with respect to addressing climate change and carbon pricing. Thank you.
The honourable member for Abbotsford.
Mr. Speaker, these are just more broken promises. At the Paris Climate Change Conference, the Minister of Environment promised a nationwide climate change plan within 90 days. Now it's clear that the minister will not deliver on that plan. Yet at the same time as the economy flounders, she's scheming to impose a carbon tax grab that will increase the price of everything, including gas, groceries, and heating. What is the minister hiding, and when will Canadians finally see her climate change plan?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think we've been pretty clear and pretty transparent. There is a First Ministers meeting in Vancouver at the beginning of March where the Prime Minister will meet with his provincial and territorial counterparts to begin to map out a pan-Canadian approach to addressing climate change. This is an issue that this government takes seriously. Unlike the previous government, which talked for 10 years about climate change and did nothing, we intend to actually make progress.
The member for Abbotsford.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member now refers to beginning the discussion on a pan-Canadian climate change framework. Let me quote the minister on CBC. I quote, "We're setting the stage for a First Ministers meeting that's going to take place at the beginning of March. That's when we're going to have this pan-Canadian framework." Now it appears that they're just beginning those discussions in March. So no climate change plan, only billions of dollars of spending on foreign vanity projects, and a punishing new carbon tax on Canadians. Will the minister now admit that she's in way over her head?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we have very little to take from the opposition with respect to how to engage in federal-provincial relations in a constructive manner. This government intends to work in collaboration with the provinces and territories to define a pan-Canadian approach that will be effective in a manner that the previous government was unable to do. Thank you.
Honourable member for Des Nez, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Human Rights Tribunal ruled that the government has discriminated against First Nations children. Documents from Health Canada confirm what First Nation people already knew. Rejecting orthodontic appeals for First Nation children is standard. Almost 100% of claims are denied. These documents actually state that the government will provide these services if the parents agree to give up their children to foster care. Mr. Speaker, this is unacceptable. What steps has the Minister of Health taken to end this discrimination?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, our government, as am I, are fully committed to ensuring that First Nations families have access to the health services that they need when they need them. I have been working with Health Canada, with the First Nations Inuit Health Branch, to address the serious health outcome gaps that First Nations and Inuit communities are experiencing. My colleague has spoken to me about this. We will continue to address these issues. We will continue to invest $2.5 billion per year and make sure that the system works for all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, government documents submitted to the Human Rights Tribunal show that Health Canada routinely denies everything from motorized wheelchairs to specialized prescription drugs for Indigenous children. But I refer the Minister to evidence tab 420 from the hearings, which relates to a 4-year-old child who suffered severe anoxic brain injury that required a specialized medical bed so she could go home to her family. And Health Canada wrote in response, absolutely not, and refused to pay. So what directives is this minister given to her staff to end this malignant culture so the culture of absolutely no for children finally becomes one of absolutely yes?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the member member opposite is fully aware that my officials in Health Canada and the First Nations Inuit Health Branch have been speaking to him on a regular basis to address specific cases of concern on this matter. We will continue to work with these issues. I have talked to all my officials in First Nations and Inuit Health Branch. We agree with the member that absolutely Indigenous peoples must have access to the healthcare services that they need when they need them, and where there are gaps in the systems, I will work with my department to make sure that we address those concerns.
The honourable member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, my riding of Tobique-Mactaquac, a rural New Brunswick riding, is home to thriving natural resource, agriculture, and manufacturing sectors, all of which utilize HoC to help invest in new technology, innovate, and grow their businesses. Can the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development please give us an update on his department's progress in ensuring that Canada's regional development agencies are helping Canadian companies and their businesses and ensuring that entrepreneurs have access to the capital they require to create jobs and grow the economy in Atlantic Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for his question and his hard work on this file. This is something that's very important to our government, and the NDP supports our hard work, Mr. Speaker, as you can see. Regional development agencies are making strategic investments that support small and medium-sized enterprises. This funding in SMEs really help these companies innovate, become more productive, and export-oriented. And I'm pleased to announce that we've approved $37 million in HoC funding. This generates opportunities for local development, Mr. Speaker, and I want to assure this House that HoC will be key for economic development in that region.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, piece by piece, this Liberal government is dismantling democracy in Canada. The first piece of legislation brought forward by the Jobs Minister is a bill to gut accountability and transparency for unions. The reason Liberal MPs have been arguing in this House that a secret ballot is somehow undemocratic and burdensome red tape.
Shame.
I would like the Minister of Employment to please explain to this House why she believes a secret ballot is undemocratic.
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What's undemocratic are bills that are brought in through the back door without proper consultation.
Order. Order. I know that people at home want to hear people's arguments, but let's wait till we have the floor. Member for Employment has the floor.
So, as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, the point is that there is a process that involves consultation and dialogue between trade unions and business, which has been proven to be effective, efficient, and fair. The previous government chose to circumvent the process and make the system unbalanced. We're changing it.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's nice to know that if I was a Liberal member of Parliament that I have no voice, because apparently a private member's bill is illegitimate with this government. Mr. Speaker, only a few months ago, each and every one of us in this House was elected by a secret ballot, a hallmark of a Canadian democracy. However, the first piece of legislation brought forward by the Jobs Minister is robbing union members of their democratic right to a secret ballot. 90% of union members polled support a secret ballot. Why is a secret ballot good enough to elect a member of Parliament?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point of the legislation is to reset the framework so that we have fairness and balance. And in fact, this bill that the previous government presented included a framework which made unionization more difficult and decertification more difficult in a package that disrupted the fairness and balance of labour and industry relationships. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government time after time has already faced questions about its ethical behaviour.
And here we go again. The Justice Minister is in partnership with her husband in a private company. He hasn't been a registered lobbyist for years, but as soon as his wife was appointed to a Liberal cabinet, he dusted off the old laptop, put new ink in the printer, and signed up as a lobbyist.
Shocking.
Is this the ethical standard that the Prime Minister approved when he said his ministers must avoid not only the conflict of interest, but even the appearance of a conflict of interest?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to be a member of Parliament, and I'm also proud to be the Minister of Justice. I have been an advocate for good governance my entire life. I take my ethical responsibilities incredibly serious and in doing everything to ensure that I am not found in a conflict. That is why my husband and I have met with the Conflict of Interest Commissioner and are following and abiding by the measures that are required to ensure that we're in compliance, and we will be in compliance with respect to what the Conflict Commissioner has said.
The Honourable Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the bar the Prime Minister set was about the perception of a conflict of interest. So, Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister not see this as a problem? The Minister of Justice sits on 6 cabinet committees, including one responsible for examining initiatives designed to strengthen the relationship with Indigenous Canadians. This is exactly the issue that her husband will now lobby the government about. The Justice Minister will now deal with legal matters involving First Nations. Her husband's lobbying work is a direct conflict with this. How can the Prime Minister justify this obvious conflict of interest?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, members on the other side are having an enormous amount of difficulty with a very basic principle. When we came to office, we raised the bar on accountability and transparency. Now, they're laughing, Mr. Speaker, because they have a lot of things to try and hide. But you know what? Canadians saw through that, and on October 19th, they chose a government that would raise the ethical rules, proactively meet with the Ethics Commissioner, follow her advice. That's what the Minister of Justice has done, and that's what she'll always continue to do.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi Bay James, Nunavut KU. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister pledged to build a new nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous peoples, and he even quoted the Supreme Court. And yet now, his government is refusing to hear the appeal from First Nations who are opposed to the Site C dam site in British Columbia. I am asking, when will the Prime Minister walk the talk? Or once again, will this be another broken promise to Indigenous peoples, as has been the case for close to 150 years by successive Liberal and Conservative governments?
The Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, there was a chief in northern Manitoba who told me that she had not had a single conversation with the Conservative government in 10 years. This government has undergone a serious set of meaningful consultations with Indigenous communities from coast to coast to coast. Without that consultation, Mr. Speaker, no energy projects will be approved. We don't repeat failed ways. We look for better ones.
The Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Perhaps the minister's problem is that he doesn't realize Site C isn't in Manitoba, it's in British Columbia. Tragically, First Nations have heard this story over and over again. Parties and campaigns promise that next time things will be different, but when it comes to the Site C dam, we realize it's just more of the same from this government. Even after the review panel found that the mega dam would have irreversible and negative impacts on the rights of Treaty 8 people, the Fisheries Minister is still signing permits. Consultations have been inadequate, letters have been ignored. When is the Liberal government going to actually commit to its sacred policy to respect First Nations rights?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I realize that not all good things are in Manitoba, just many good things. I see that there's some scattered applause from Manitobans on the other side. The member knows that this government has done whatever it can do to send the signals to Indigenous communities across the country that this will be a new era on meaningful nation-to-nation consultations with Indigenous peoples. It has been more than a decade since that has happened. Its time has come for a new era in that relationship. That time is now.
The honourable member for Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Mr. Speaker, it's being reported that 40 state-run Iranian media outlets have jointly offered a new bounty for the death of author Salman Rushdie. The renewed call for his death comes on the anniversary of the fatwa issued by the Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989. Make no mistake, this regime in Tehran is putting on a false front. It continues to be a serious threat to peace and stability. Why is the government rushing to embrace Iran when it clearly cannot be trusted?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Canada needs to engage on the international stage much more than before, even with regimes with which we have difficulty. Engagement does not mean that we agree with Iran's policy, but it does establish a pathway towards dialogue, regional security, and economic opportunity. Turning one's back does not help either to provide accountability for such a country as Iran. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Mr. Speaker, not long after the lifting of sanctions against Iran, Russia tried to sell fighter planes and missile systems to the Tehran regime. Our allies clearly state that this sales of arms violates a UN ban, but the Liberal government is naively getting closer and closer to Iran and Vladimir Putin. Will the government condemn this massive arms sales that threatens peace and our friend Israel?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're very pleased that our government is going to accede to the Arms Trade Treaty, something that the previous government failed to do. We are making that a priority for this government because we know that we have a more constructive role to play. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the Boycott, Divest, Sanctions campaigners claim it to be a human rights movement. In fact, it's nothing more than a very thinly disguised, multidimensional hate campaign. It targets the economy and the citizens of the only democracy in the Middle East. Last week during the debate, the Liberals were all over the place on this issue. How can the minister assure this House that when our motion passes, his government will take it seriously?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the contrary, Israel is not only a key ally, but equally a steadfast friend. The Jewish community has deep roots here in Canada and contributes greatly to Canadian society. A boycott does not bring us any closer to any viable or constructive solution, so we will support that. However, this motion doesn't bring us any closer to constructive working together. It seeks to divide. We firmly believe that negotiations constitute the only way to arrive at lasting, durable peace.
The Honourable Member for Avignon-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, in the face of unfavourable economic situation, my riding and the Gaspé region developed world-renowned expertise in producing electricity from wind energy. In fact, our region has some 20 wind parks that produce close to 1,000 megawatts of electricity and that also employ hundreds of workers. Can the Minister of Natural Resources share with this House the commitments made by our government to support the producers of clean and renewable energy and create jobs for the workers in my riding? The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker.
To engage the renewable energy sector in British Columbia, Manitoba, New Brunswick, and Quebec, Canada boasts one of the cleanest electricity systems in the G7 and in the world. Our government is committed to investing an additional $100 million each year in clean technology producers and $200 million each year to support innovation and the use of clean technologies in the natural resources sector. Mr. Speaker, that's real progress.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Veterans Affairs is misleading Canadians. Contrary to the statements he made, it is the preceding Conservative government that took important measures to fight homelessness for veterans. We launched projects in Toronto, Calgary, Victoria, and London, and these projects helped veterans stay off the streets. In addition, we were the ones who fought this problem in a targeted fashion. Will the minister pledge today to renew the same mandate?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. And one of the first things I did was consult with many veterans out there and veteran organizations. And what they confirmed to me was the former government fumbled the ball 47 ways to Sunday on dealing with their issues. I can tell you we're taking a new approach to this. We're working on getting veterans the benefits as well as the help they need when they need it. And that includes fighting issues around homelessness. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Longueuil Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, in October, millions of citizens voted to resuscitate Radio-Canada CBC after it was gutted by the Conservatives, and yet the bad news continues under the Liberals' reign. There is now a for sale sign in front of the Radio-Canada Tower in Montreal. This decision, which was taken in secret, risks sacrificing a symbol of the quiet revolution in Quebec. The minister announced consultations, that's all very well, but it could be sold tomorrow. Will the minister at least declare a moratorium so we can explore better options before this irreversible sale? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. First, I would like to remind people of Radio-Canada's independence with regard to its decisions. And obviously, I asked Radio-Canada CBC to hold consultations to see what the employees think about this, what the unions think about this, and also the political players in the Montreal area. I would also like to remind my colleague of the importance of Radio-Canada CBC to have a place for its employees of the highest standards, especially in this digital era. Thank you.
Member for Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, as the aunt of a 15-year-old nephew, I'm concerned about how easy it is for youth his age to obtain marijuana. What measures is the government taking to ensure that by legalizing marijuana, we are making it more difficult for children and youth to access the substance? Can the Minister of Justice offer an update on our party's commitment to regulate and legalize marijuana?
Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for her question. Our government has committed to legalize, regulate, and restrict access to marijuana, and we will be proceeding in that matter in an orderly fashion and will take the time necessary in order to do it right. And until Parliament has enacted new legislation to ensure marijuana is carefully regulated, current laws remain in force and should be obeyed. I will be working with my parliamentary secretary, the Ministers of Health and Public Safety, to ensure that we put in place a process that keeps marijuana out of the hands of children and the proceeds out of the hands of criminals.
The honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Canadians were horrified by the unspeakable murders committed by serial killer Robert Pickton. And despite the fact that he is now in prison, families of his victims were shocked to hear that he has recently published a book. What will this government do to ensure that serial killer Robert Pickton in no way benefits financially or through the distribution of his depraved writings?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the impact of this book by Pickton is painfully traumatic for the victims. All Canadians share in that grief. Canadians also expect Amazon to respond quickly and sympathetically to this outrage, which I understand they have done this afternoon. The Correctional Service is investigating the source of the manuscript. We will be examining all those who have assisted in any way in this odious enterprise.
The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, CAA is losing jobs, Bombardier is shedding jobs, and other companies are shedding jobs. The best guarantee of to maintain planes in Canada is to follow the current Air Canada Act. And yet these provisions were flouted, and to date the government has not intervened. Since when can the minister ignore laws or change them to ensure, or rather, when will this government require that the Attorney General will step in to help employees of Avios and to force Air Canada to enforce its law to help citizens of Quebec? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Thank you for the question. Mr. Speaker, we are all delighted that the government of Quebec has decided to abandon the lawsuit that it had instituted against Air Canada, and in return, Air Canada will build a centre of excellence for the upkeep of the C-Series planes over the next 20 years. That's good news. That creates jobs for the future of our country, and we are now ready to examine the Air Canada Public Participation Act, to clarify it, to ensure that there will be no further lawsuits in future. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Bécancour, Nicolas Sorel. Mr. Speaker, 1,800 jobs were lost under Abeos, all of that because the federal government did not enforce its own law. Will the Minister of Transport be modernizing the Air Canada Act to legalize the transfer of aeronautics jobs abroad? Is the minister aware that by not enforcing this law, the federal government has colluded in the transfer of airplane upkeep, Air Canada airplane upkeep to Hong Kong, Singapore, Tel Aviv, and Minnesota? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I have just said, and as my colleague should know, it is the Government of Canada that instituted legal proceedings against Air Canada. Now the Government of Quebec has decided to stand down from this lawsuit because Air Canada has put a great deal on the table. Not only is it buying between 45 and 75 C-Series planes, but it has it has also decided to build a centre of excellence for C-Series upkeep over the next 20 years. That is good news. It will create major jobs for Quebec. The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, there's a problem in the West. The government has acted with regard to the TFW programs, but Quebecers can no longer employ experienced workers. The government is aware of this program, but is not doing anything. Will these farm workers be exempted from the 4-year rule, and will she ensure that they not have to start all over again every year?
Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There has been no change in the rules regarding agricultural workers. We understand that there is an administrative backlog in Quebec, and our staff are working hard to get rid of that backlog. Otherwise, there's been no change.
It being 3:06 p.m., pursuant to order made on Thursday, February 18, 2016, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion of Mr. Clement relating to the business of supply. Calling the members. La question est la suivante.
The question is as follows. Mr. Clement, seconded by Ms. Rimpel, moved that, given Canada and Israel share a long history of friendship, as well as economic and diplomatic relations, the House reject the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which promotes the demonization and legitimization of the State of Israel, and call upon the government to condemn any and all attempts by Canadian organizations, groups, or individuals to promote the BDS movement both here at home and abroad.
The Qui appuie la motion?
All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Rose.
Ms. Ambrose.
Mr. Harper.
Mr. Harper.
Mr. Nicholson.
Mr. Nicholson.
Ms. Finley.
Ms. Finley.
Mr. Ritz.
Mr. Ritz.
Mrs. Bloch.
Mrs. Bloch.
Ms. Leach.
Ms. Leach.
Monsieur Blaney, Bellechasse, Lévis.
Monsieur Blaney,